Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast, MITRE ATT&CK for MSPs. Mike is the Vice President of SIM Product Management here at Netshurian. He has served as a product manager in various sectors of cybersecurity, including SIM, vulnerability management, encryption, EDR, and so forth. He specializes in UX, UI workflow management, and has even done consulting in this field. One of his objectives is to make cybersecurity usable and understandable by all via simple, easy-to-learn design instead of the strictly data-driven days of old. All right, I'll turn it over to Mike Ohanian. Mike?
All right, thank you very much for that kind intro. So first off, before we delve into the main topic of our discussion, which is the MITRE ATT&CK framework, I want to give a little bit of insight into who is Netshurian, our company. So we're a managed security services provider, and we have a convergence blend of branch network management and threat detection response. The primary focus of this discussion will be on the left side, threat detection response, as the MITRE ATT&CK framework focuses solely on that. But overall, our company has, like I said, a strong convergence of cybersecurity and network management. We are officially a MSSP, or some people call it master MSSP, or a top 200 MSSP in securing the edge network and managing threat protection. So our agenda, really quickly, what I'd like you to walk away from the discussion is a good understanding of what the MITRE ATT&CK framework is and why it matters, most importantly, to our partners in MSPs and MSSPs. Why is it important in improving critical threat detection, and how to employ the MITRE ATT&CK framework for better threat detection overall. These are the 4 things I'd really like everyone to walk away from as a true value from today's presentation. So with that, a quick poll to get things started. How familiar are you with the MITRE ATT&CK framework?
Okay, I'll be launching that poll in just a second, and there it goes. So we'll give everybody here a couple of seconds to get their answers in. Please choose one of the following: building my foundational knowledge, knowledgeable but not in use, or using the framework. We'll give everybody just a couple more seconds. Closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, poll is closed. And now I'm going to share with you guys the results. You can probably see, building my foundational knowledge, the runaway winner, 77%. Knowledgeable but not in use, 15%. And 8% of the audience said they are currently using the framework. All right, let me turn this back over to you, Mike.
Good, that's good to hear. You've come to the right place to learn about some things that can potentially help you with this knowledge that we'll provide and providing an ultimate value to your customers. So with that, let's focus first on some of the questions that we would hear from our partners. In cybersecurity in general, we'll see that this framework is key in early threat detection and providing that security value. But we want to make sure that we focus on a lot of these questions that our partners do ask. So, how can you provide more visibility and context on threats in general? Is there a means by which you can simplify it? You can provide more data, you can provide more analytics. Is there a way to have that advanced warning? If you look at the entire threat landscape or the anatomy of a threat or anatomy of a breach, it just doesn't happen all of a sudden. Oftentimes, and you'll see when we go later in this presentation, a threat or a breach is discovered well in advance of when it started. Is there a way to ensure that we have an advanced warning on that to minimize the damage that it does cause? And is there a way to minimize the impact of a potential incident or breach? Like I said, a breach is a process, a bad incident is a process, and sometimes it's all about mitigating that and ensuring that if you are breached, if something does happen, it does happen in a way that minimizes the actual damage from that. And then lastly, one of the big questions that we could ask is how can I provide a big picture of insights and the threat landscape and attacks and so forth at a level that we can all speak and understand, especially for executives. So key questions that were asked routinely, and I think the integration of this important framework will help solve a lot of these questions. So moving on, I want to just talk about in general the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Now there are a series of frameworks that we can all leverage, available to us. Some of us might be familiar with the NIST 800 and 171 framework. Cybersecurity maturity model is a new one that's still evolving. Lockheed Martin cybersecurity kill chain, for example. The MITRE ATT&CK framework doesn't look to displace or dislodge any of those. It actually looks to complement a cybersecurity posture. In my opinion, it's one of the stronger ones because it centers on actual attack data and analytics compiled in a very easy to understand framework. It doesn't specifically focus on things like Department of Defense or things like that. It's more broad. But like I said, I want everyone to know that it doesn't displace. We're not asking anyone to come in and say, get rid of anything that you're already doing. No, this is a great augmentation or complementary solution to enhance our threat detection and capabilities. So with that, like I said, one of our key questions that we want to focus on is early threat detection, why this is keenly important. So data breaches are more common than a lot of people think. So for example, 33% of businesses have had a data breach in their lifetime. You don't think that this is that common when you look at other things like how often are homes burglarized or something, but for some reason in the cybersecurity world, breaches are a lot more common. Another concept to look at is the concept of dwell time. The time from which the actual breach happens to the time the breach is discovered is called dwell time, and it's about 127 days on average. Now, that's a large number. Well, what does that actually mean? The analogy I would put forth to you is, imagine if you had a jewelry chest or jewelry drawer that you had jewelry in that you only wore once or twice a year, fancy dinners and so forth. And you were planning a fancy dinner with your spouse and you went to get some of that jewelry and it was gone. Well, from the time you discover it on that instance when you have that, oh my gosh moment, my jewelry is gone, that jewelry was actually taken probably about 127 days ago. Or at least the person got into your house to take that jewelry 127 days ago without you knowing. So they've likely had some access, they've likely infiltrated the system and potentially targeted and or stole whatever valuable asset they were seeking well before you actually discover it. And this is bad because the last thing is the cost of this. So if someone is able to breach a system or a network or a computer 127 days ago, oftentimes they go undiscovered for such a lengthy period of time, the access remains. They can keep coming in and out. And as they do that, and as they exfiltrate important information or they cause more damage, the longer this period exists, the more expensive it is and the more costly these breaches are. So the average data breach in general, this is small scale to large ones like you hear about the Target and the Los Angeles Times one, average is about $3.9 million per data breach. Again, not a small number. So early detection, specifically when looking at that overall cycle of a breach and that cycle of a terrible event, if we can cut that down from anywhere below 127 days, you significantly reduce the risk and the cost of any breach that does happen. So that's why early detection is keenly important. So how do we get there? First, like I said, this presentation is all about the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So I want to explain quickly a little bit of the background. So MITRE, the MITRE organization, is a federally funded nonprofit. And it originally started and still does focus primarily on federal agencies with their cybersecurity needs and data and investigation and so forth. Obviously, this framework being used by us here at NetSurian in our event tracker offering, it branches out to commercial needs, private needs, business needs, and so forth. But that's the origination of it. We talk about the two words together, MITRE and ATT&CK. The attack component is the framework. It's called the ATT&CK framework. It's a globally accessible knowledge base that summarizes in a large degree of detail, but also in simple language that's easy to understand, the variety of techniques and tactics that hackers and adversaries would use on a day-to-day basis when they're conducting their attacks. So the MITRE ATT&CK framework, MITRE is the organization, ATT&CK is the framework, and you'll hear these two terms kind of used out in the marketplace very much together. So from there, the MITRE organization has organized this attack framework. Now this is a high-level 100,000-foot view of the attack matrix. And it's an example that you'll see. This is a very, very fluid matrix, meaning the MITRE organization is continually analyzing threats and breaches and finding out the methods by which the adversaries are conducting their attacks. And then they'll organize those and then codify those into this matrix. So it does expand, it does grow. It's not a snapshot, and it doesn't just stay static over time. But this is a high-level view of a very complex but simple to understand matrix of different types of techniques and tactics, which we'll dive into in just a second, that they organize for us to leverage in our cybersecurity offering. And of course, if you want more information to really dig into a lot of the details of these, attack.mitre.org, you can get lost in that. It's a great resource to look and see and discover and to gain some more education on this matrix. So with that, we're going to keep going deeper into what this is to show the value of how well organized and how it's orchestrated for our use and how it helps us provide a greater overall cybersecurity outcome. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the tactics and the techniques itself. So on the top of the matrix, we're zoomed in a little bit. You'll notice that I've cut it down just a bit so we can focus on the words. When we're looking at the entire matrix, it's impossible to zoom in. But I'm going to take a couple of these and zoom in a little. On the top part of the matrix are the actual tactics. And think of that as the adversary's goal, the hacker's goal, whether they want initial access, whether they want a defense evasion. This categorically organizes all of the potential tactics and things that the adversary might be going at. And then within each tactic are the techniques, the subcomponents. Now, I am not an actual expert in the individual makeup of every one of these. Consider these individual recipes. If you look at the top left, for example, simply looking at the technique of drive-by compromise, it's under the tactic of initial access. So what that's saying is in that very top left corner, if an adversary or a hacker wanted initial access, they can use the technique called drive-by compromise to do that, to execute on that. Of course, you can go down that list for the same initial access tactic, their objective. They can leverage the technique spear phishing attachment. If you were to click into any of these on the MITRE Foundation's website, you'll get into the specific details of what happens and how the attack looks and feels and so forth. One of the great advantages of integrating this into a threat protection platform such as NetSurian's Event Tracker is, since that's already been done for us, we're leveraging all the stuff behind the scenes to provide a simple and easy to use cybersecurity outcome. And we'll show that in our dashboard and stuff coming soon. But what I want everyone here to walk away with is just a high-level understanding of how well organized, well thought out, and well researched the MITRE organization has done, the job they have done in organizing a matrix and a set of data and information for us that summarizes the types of techniques and tactics that are out there that are used by adversaries. Going a touch further, you'll know that these are grounded in real data from global cybersecurity incidents. They're not just something that the MITRE organization just made up on their own. They study lots of different breaches. People provide data to them all the time. They're focused on the specific techniques, tactics, and protocols, not just an indicator of compromise, not just an alarm or a bell and whistle that went off type of thing. It actually focuses on the actual items, maneuvers, manipulations that an adversary might take. And the biggest goal, in my opinion, at the very bottom is that this communicates in a common language across the cybersecurity space. So when I talk common language, I mean, one of the analogies I use is think of music. If this was a sheet of music, no matter which country you are across the globe, I can put this in front of someone who's playing the piano and they can play the music because the language is ubiquitous, it's commonly understood. This cybersecurity framework that they've laid out it exists in that very same manner, that it's very common so that we don't have trouble communicating up and down our internal chains of command and externally or internally to customers. So it's very helpful and it simplifies the understanding and getting to the root of the cause of the problem. So if we're examining a specific technique, we're going to notice here that if you were to examine the breakdown of some of these techniques, they'll also lead you to specific attacks that have happened before. The MITRE organization keeps a database of all these very complex attacks. So again, we're kind of going even deeper. We started at the highest level, the peak of what this is, talking about tactics and techniques, and now it's kind of how these are executed. So what you're going to notice here is this a specific attack that's been charted out. It's a common one. Some people might have actually heard it, the baby shark attack. There's also things like WannaCry and tons of different wares that ransomware applications that have hurt businesses around the globe that were broadcasted on the news that you might know of, and some that might not. But the MITRE Foundation keeps a database of all these. But then if you were to examine that, this one, an example, the baby shark attack, you can actually see the specific techniques that were actually employed or can be employed to execute on this attack. So for example, the ID of the technique, you'll notice there, T1059. The name is command line interface, and the use was this attack, the baby shark attack, has used this to execute these commands, and then you can even dig into this further. What this is doing is this is organizing a menu for you to make it a lot more simple for a company like ours to identify the types of attacks that are going on. Because remember, this is all about increasing your cybersecurity posture and your efficiency of discovering attacks, and specifically discovering them early in the chain to minimize the damage. So for example, let's just say our security operations center, which is monitoring our customers and our partners' networks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, notices that on a customer's endpoint, the command line interface attack T1059 was tripped off. Let's just say we noticed that. Now that in and of itself, running any kind of command line interface job might not necessarily be a threat. It might not be something that anyone would even look at. But let's say the next thing lights up, T1132 data encoding, and then T1083. So here we are 3 steps of the way in of the baby shark attack. Our security practitioners who live and breathe this stuff on a daily basis, who understand the details of the MITRE attack framework and how to leverage it, can already see 1 + 2 + 3. Okay, I'm going to examine this. And now they've discovered that with these 3 things going off, it's most likely that that this endpoint is under attack. Specifically, the adversary is trying to execute this baby shark attack. So why is that important? Well, obviously, when we can do these types of operations and prevent the attack early on, not letting them get down to 12, 13, 14, 15 steps, or however many steps this is, because we've identified this simply, again, we can prevent the attack from getting a lot more intense, a lot more damaging, and kill it a lot earlier, and take the maneuvers to shut this off or to prevent it from going further, and reducing that dwell time from, say, 127 days to potentially a matter of hours or even minutes. And that's keenly important. So what does that mean for our partners? What does that mean for anyone who wants to leverage NetSharing's Event Tracker service? Is that we are leveraging the state-of-the-art technology that we have in our Event Tracker platform with the world's probably most complete and most compelling cybersecurity framework called the MITRE ATT&CK framework, to ensure that we are on top of these types of threats, to cut them off early, to understand them early, and to provide that defense back to our partners so that they can ultimately provide that to their customers, thereby securing their customers, building those relationships, and providing a stronger outcome to the end customer overall. So with that, we've talked about the framework itself and how it's incredibly valuable to get attacks early, to understand them early as they're forming, and how a framework that's clearly identified these and laid these out in this wonderful schematic for all of us to see and use helps us do that. On top of that, though, you also have to have a good interface inside a platform, and you have to have personnel who can actually understand and leverage that interface in a clear and easy to use manner. So we've incorporated this into our Event Tracker SIM console. This is the security of the software component of our offering. You can see a visual of this on the right-hand side. The center spoke of these diagrams are endpoints that we would be monitoring. And like I said, here at NetSharing, in our Event Tracker service, we have our Security Operations Center, our SOC, monitoring these 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So when these things pop up, if you take a look at that center purple one, and we can see that a handful of techniques have gone off, that draws our security analyst's eyes to that screen, to that particular endpoint, to start executing and looking at and diving into what is the nature of what's going on here. It's very critical, because most of the time, partners and customers don't have the manpower, the expertise often to do that themselves, and it's incredibly costly to staff that up. We'll get into that a little bit later. Secondly, it'll obviously identify those adversarial patterns, and that serves that early warning. So like I said, when any of these techniques light up by their number, T1057, T1047, whatever that is, our system will catch it. Now, again, we always want to say that there's always context to be applied and who applies that context. If any of these techniques are run, like I said, a command line, something is run, might not necessarily be bad, but when you have 1 and 2 and 3 of these lighting up, that's where our security experts come in and start providing that early warning. The third component is the enrichment of the intel and the context behind the actual techniques used. If we pair this framework with the security practitioners that we provide with our service, it's really a strong cybersecurity defensive posture to be able to look at that and examine what's going on, to provide our partners with information of true attacks, and to not over alert them or over worry them with false positives. So one of the great benefits of having such a well-ingrained framework given to all our security practitioners in our SOC is that our partners don't have to worry about being inundated with false alarms or false positives. And lastly, what does this all mean is that we help our partners, our MSPs and our MSSPs, provide a greater threat coverage that uses these known exploits, that come up on the framework, and it helps them ultimately provide that cybersecurity service to their customers and protect them a lot more efficiently than the use of, or without the use of the framework or security personnel that we provide. Some of the additional partner benefits of adopting this framework by leveraging Asurian's event tracker offering. At the top here, we have a quote from one of our partners that it's giving our SMBs, our small and medium-sized partners, a huge advantage because we've essentially done a lot of the work for them. We've integrated this amazingly in-depth, universally understood framework, and we provide the experts behind the scenes so that our small SMB partners who typically don't have the means to do so can leverage this and, for lack of a better word, kind of be the heroes to their customers. Oftentimes with our partners, the end customer doesn't really know that it's Asurian or Event Tracker behind the scenes. And whether that's true or not is not our biggest concern. We want to ensure that our partners feel that maximum value, that they've got a great security tool, some amazing practitioners, and all the state-of-the-art and best frameworks possible behind the scenes. So with that, one of the great benefits is the education that you get with this, that with our partners, you'll notice in the quote provided by Brad Alexander, the CTO of our partner Medion, he uses the term co-managed, and that's very important. This, while we do provide the security experts and the integrated framework and the dashboarding and everything that goes with it, it's truly co-managed. We just don't kind of do the work behind the scenes and you don't get to learn it on your own. The whole difference between teach a man how to fish and show a man how to fish type of thing. We're walking this journey hand in hand with you. We want to build those relationships with our partners and show you that we're a true partner with you as you provide that outcome to your customers. The efficacy of this is incredibly important too, because the detection and the response, as you can see with the integration in our dashboard, will ultimately provide a greater outcome to your customers as well. You'll reduce the time for breaches. And one thing to really note on that as well is that customers might ultimately forgive if something slips through. For example, the concept of perfect protection is nirvana. It will never happen. But knowing that things will potentially eventually happen if they do, a customer is more likely to forgive an MSP or an MSSP if it's caught early and the damage is minimal, the dwell time is reduced to near zero. And it's kind of like, imagine if just a small fire went off in your kitchen and you handled it very quickly before letting the whole house burn down. Customers are very forgiving on that. And the efficacy that we provide will increase the likelihood that that's how it's handled. Without integrating with the key framework and providing those key security personnel, the greater threat and damage that these cybersecurity attacks cause, the costlier they are, as we talked about earlier, customers are so much less likely to forgive our partners and our MSSPs in that regard. So having something that's incredibly efficient at a great degree of efficacy is key. And our offering is huge on that. The response, obviously, the earlier the warning, the better. Like we said, if we can examine these attacks as they happen, it helps our partners then protect their customers better by taking that information that we provide and engaging with them. So that ultimate protection of our partners as customers is key. And then, of course, the credibility that we're using a well-established, universally understood, very deeply organized and orchestrated framework. This isn't something that we're leveraging from 10, 15, 20 years ago. This is updated very, very often, many times a year. So it's, like I said, top of the line state-of-the-art framework that we're using here. I want to talk really quickly about, as we go deep, just a few examples of how this manifests and how it works. So one of the things that our event tracker SOC does is we capture some of these threats that we've caught. It's called the catch of the day. Think of it as a little bit of a cybersecurity pat on the back, but it's important to recognize that we do a very good job here providing that outcome to our partners, which, like I said before, has an effect to make our partners look like heroes to their customers, building those relationships and maintaining that long-term persistency with their end customers. But obviously, I can't get into the details of the who part of this. So with the network, an MSP had implemented event tracker to mitigate threats across 725 endpoints. It was a service industry customer. And we had detected an unsafe hash connecting with the malicious IP. And it was permitted to install, and it was by an up-to-date antivirus. So without getting into the details of the efficacy of antivirus, I personally feel, and we feel here at Asurion, that antivirus is good, that's fine. It's technology that's been leveraged for years. But to think that the adversaries and the hackers themselves are not onto that, I think is very short-sighted. I think we need things like a deeper understanding of context-based framework, like the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So they got past the antivirus, and our SOC started to notice this, leveraging the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and alerted the MSP to the ransomware that was coming, essentially. Caught it early, identified all the malicious hashes, blocked those, and leveraged our framework early in the life cycle to essentially keep the end customer safe through the MSP. When this was going on the end customer's endpoints, we contact the MSP, the ultimate provider of that service to the customer. All the details come with that, and we'll just go into that in the next slide. And the MSP can kind of go in and ensure that the end customer is ultimately safe. So with that, just to get a little bit of details of how that's orchestrated, you're going to see that we're able to provide those details. And this is kind of just a high-level look of what we would show to an MSP and provide that context to them of what's going on. On the left side, you'll notice that these are the tactics that were leveraged and some of the techniques of those tactics that the adversaries were starting to leverage. And we contact the partner, the MSP or the MSSP, you'll see that we have already a list of things that we've caught or that we've noticed going on. So that way, the partner themselves are armed and ready to execute and provide that service to their customers. Hey, look, this was going on this endpoint. We need to shut this off. We need to do this and so forth. And we are walking hand in hand with our partners in that. So like I said, the ultimate value of this is making sure that our partners are really empowered to ultimately keep their customers safe and satisfied and ensure that if things do happen, they're caught early and with the minimum amount of damage possible. So with that, another quick poll. Do you have the staff and the skills to implement the MITRE ATT&CK framework?
All right, the poll has been launched. Simple answers here for everybody. Yes, no, or not sure if we have that staff and skills to implement it. Give people just a few more seconds here, since there's not a lot of reading on this poll, which shouldn't take that long for people to get their answers in. All right, we'll give everybody 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Closing the poll now. All right, and here I will share the results of this poll. Do you have the staff skills to implement MITRE ATT&CK? 55% say yes, 36% say no, and we've got 9% saying not sure.
All right. Definitely interesting results of the poll. With any security operations center where there is ample staff, we and our operations can complement and augment that. In fact, a lot of our customers themselves do have sizable security operations and security operations centers of their own. Sometimes they might not even have a security operations center, a SOC, they might actually just have a NOC, and we provide the SOC. But if you tend to be a partner that already has a sizable staff, like I said, we augment or enhance that in a lot of ways. For those who feel that they might not necessarily have that staff, that's very common. It's nothing to fret about. That's where we can easily be leveraged. And if you are of the SMB size, I think that we are typically a near perfect solution, because you have the infrastructure, but in order to protect thousands and thousands of your customers' endpoints, it does take a large, very highly skilled staff to ensure that safely. So let's talk about a couple of those items when leveraging the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So many service providers in general will lack the time and the expertise and the resources to integrate a framework into their operations. So the framework can be, well, it's simple to understand and universally accepted. It can be tough to implement. Simply looking at a matrix of all the tactics and techniques won't do you much until you apply context, understand how they operate, and some connectivity between some of that. And the next slide will highlight that even more. For us, since it's integrated into our platform, it can be utilized quickly. Like I said, if you remember from that, our partners, the CTO at our partners quote, it says we are essentially co-managed. The interface and the dashboard that we leverage internally with our security operations center is also leveraged by our partners as well. So we have the same dashboard. So if there's any time to collaborate or to look at a problem or look at something that's happening, we're all looking at the same pane of glass. And like I said, the third point here, our biggest advantage is that we do provide the personnel, the eyes on the screen and the fingers behind the keyboard in a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week fashion. Having a staff of your own in this type of way can be very costly. And if you don't have a staff that's typically 24/7, there tends to be some gaps. It's not a thing of any kind of insult, it's just the reality of the situation. For us, cybersecurity and the cybersecurity posture that we provide doesn't start at 9 in the morning and end at 5 in the day. This is a 24/7 operation. And our partners can sleep well knowing that their end customers are protected, because no matter what, we're behind the scenes and we have our partners' backs. And with that, we can, like we've talked about, find threats early and provide the reasonable, actionable remediation and recommendations to our customers. So the benefit overall is that you have the integration of this great framework and the capabilities, the humans behind the scene, like I say, the security practitioners, to execute on that and to provide the ultimate security outcome and the defense that we think our partners need and have to fight the ever expanding and complex threats that are coming our way on a daily basis. So lastly, I want to talk about just some quick use cases of why that's important to have those practitioners. You're going to see 4 of them really quickly here. We don't have to go into the deep details of all those, but detection is obviously front and center with that, but then there's threat intelligence as well. You'll notice that there's some schematics, different versions of the MITRE ATT&CK matrix shown here, and different items lit up. Threat intelligence, for example, will show things like what is covered, what is not covered, what is typically easily open or vulnerable to our customers and their endpoints. Adversary emulation on the bottom right. This is key. That goes above just initial protection early in the cybersecurity kill chain. This is an operation that's based on data. So for example, if you typically had a specific vertical that your MSP or MSP might have, MSP or MSSP might cover, let's say the financial vertical. And those financial institutions tend to use the same type of software. Well, if we study how those attacks go against a certain vertical, we'll know that technique A is targeted first, technique B is targeted second, technique C is targeted third, and we can examine defensive postures that help specific verticals. Take this for any vertical: banking, small food or QSR restaurants, or so forth. Adversary emulation really helps us get to the heart of how do actors behave when they're targeting specific endpoints. And the last one on the bottom left, assessment and engineering. You'll notice that we've applied some colors and so forth, again, overlaid on the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. This highlights things that are, again, routinely accessed, routinely leveraged, versus ones that are not. So think of it as if we know there's a commonly used tactic or technique out there, we can examine the endpoints that you have in your network and say, well, this one's going to be likely targeted a lot easier, and that one we don't have to focus on for a number of reasons. Maybe it's exists in a different type of network, it's behind a different firewall, or so forth. And the reason is because that can help us focus resources where attacks are most likely to happen. So instead of just being broad or just applicable across the entire matrix, across every endpoint, we can even tweak and align defenses a little bit better. So there's use cases that come from the MITRE ATT&CK framework that, again, ultimately provide a greater cybersecurity posture and not just initial attack defense. So to round this out, obviously, there are resources available here, the MITRE ATT&CK's website on the attack framework. But within our own offering, you can visit the number of sites here, how we integrated the attack framework, the catch of the days, and the MITRE ATT&CK data sheet to learn more. I hope that everyone here has walked away with the knowledge of, what is this framework, why is it important, how in-depth it is, and how it's built and orchestrated, how to apply it, and why that's valuable, and most importantly, why that's valuable to our partners, our MSPs and MSSPs. Lastly, if you wanted to see some of this in action, we have some upcoming demos in October and November. And if you register at nexturion.com/webcast, you can sign up for those. They're great. Some of our security practitioners internally will be running those, and it kind of puts us all together. And I definitely recommend, if you have additional interest, to sign up for those. So with that, are there any questions that are out there I could help answer?
Yes, thank you so much, Mike. There are a number of questions that have come in. If you have any more, please enter them in the questions box, and we'll ask those of Mike as soon as we can. First off, someone said, I may have missed this, but did you say which attack framework you're integrating with?
Sure. So the broad framework is known as the enterprise framework, is what we have officially integrated with.
Okay, perfect. We did have a question about price. For those who already utilize Event Tracker, what is the cost for adding MITRE ATT&CK framework?
Great question. For those who do leverage it, there is no additional cost. This comes with your standard offering. It's a tool that we are using ourselves internally. If you're a partner or a user that doesn't necessarily log in yourself, that's fine too. But if you do, if you were to log into your Event Tracker console, go to the menu on the left and expand it, you would see the MITRE ATT&CK framework in there. Came out with version 9.3, so recommending upgrades are always a good idea, but it is free at no additional cost. No cost for the service, no cost for access to the dashboard, and no cost for any remediations or anything that come from our integration of the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
No cost, that's something everybody can get behind. Here's another question. I am really new in learning attack as a solution for my company. I don't see any DLP solution, not sure if it is there. Also, does your solution provide any compliance coverage as well, like PCI, SOC 2, etc.?
Sure, I'll answer the second part first. Compliance coverage, absolutely. Event Tracker as the solution is incredibly strong at cybersecurity outcomes, defensive posturing, and so forth. But on top of that, we support a number of frameworks to help our customers maintain cybersecurity compliance. From PCI to NIST 800-171, to even the upcoming CMMC module, which we'll probably be posting our solution brief within the next month or two. So think of Event Tracker, if you had a pie chart, most of it is security and defensive posture and providing security outcomes, but there is a large component of there that is compliance-based. For the other one, DLP and David, what was the second part? It was DLP and
no, that was just DLP.
Okay, just DLP. So DLP, in general, Event Tracker itself doesn't necessarily fill in for specific DLP as an overall protocol or procedure. It can help and it can assist, and we can work with partners on how to handle that. But DLP is usually a different type of offering. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is focused specifically on the threats and the adversaries and the techniques. So it doesn't mean that you're kind of out in the dark when it comes to DLP. Obviously, with our operations, we mix and enhance the cybersecurity offering with what we have, but we don't say specifically we are a DLP solution in and of itself.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. How does attack differ from the Lockheed Martin kill chain or cybersecurity lifecycle?
Oh, great question. Question that came from probably slide 5 or 6 that was in there. We talked about the different frameworks. So first, like I said, I want to make clear again that it doesn't supplant or replace any kind of frameworks, just to get that out there. But the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the Lockheed Martin kill chain framework are very, very similar. In fact, they actually both identify a lot of the same techniques. You'll notice they even use the same verbiage: exfiltration, intrusion, and so forth. One of the big differences between the two is that the MITRE ATT&CK framework's focus is specifically on the techniques themselves, meaning they do a great job of looking at just the techniques as independent actors and applying context, and then that helps defend against some obfuscated attacks that might not necessarily come in a very linear model. The cybersecurity, Lockheed Martin cybersecurity kill chain does still focus on those adversarial techniques, but more on the actual order of operations themselves. So a little bit less context applied, a little less focus on the specifics that the technique is made up of, and it's more of how does one item in the recipe interact with the next. So to try to give more of a silly analogy, if MITRE ATT&CK framework was baking cookies, it would just tell you potentially, here's the components of the flour, the chocolate chips, the butter, and so forth, and what makes the butter and how to put it all together. The Lockheed Martin kill chain is more first do the butter, then do this, then do that type of thing. Less focused on the ingredients, more focused on the operations. So hope that helps answer that question.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Mike. What are the data sources for endpoint event detection? It says collecting this type of data is far more complex than a traditional AV/AS agent would collect and or deliver.
Yeah, so traditional AVs agents, for example, often focus on very identifiable items such as hashes or calls to bad or known IPs. Typically, those are relatively binary. Was a bad hash that I recognize executed or not? The source of the information for the MITRE ATT&CK framework, or for Event Tracker in general, is a number of things: logs, user actions, and so forth. So in the old days, what I would call the old days, or the days of AV, like I said, you're looking for a specific, more binary thing. Was this fingerprint done here? Is this easily identifiable? But the source of information that we're leveraging is, for example, if you remember in the presentation, we're talking about some of the MITRE ATT&CK techniques using command line interface. That in and of itself is not necessarily a bad actor, or running a script might not necessarily be an adversarial action. But we collect all the logs behind that action. And if we notice that that action is taken on an endpoint next to another action, or by an account that had someone change the user from a regular user to a super admin, or stuff like that. All that data for us, where our bread and butter really is in the collection and analytics of those logs, aggregating that data, looking for correlations across that data, and then combining those into events. So it's a multitude of data sources that involve not just running of hashes or executables or running of scripts, but the logs behind it. When did it occur? What time did it occur? Was it on a critical asset? Did the user log into one endpoint, then another endpoint, then another endpoint? And all that information feeds into those tactics and techniques, which start to light up on our dashboard to give us a deeper and more complex view of things.
Okay. Let's see, one more question here. So if you have any other ones, please get them in. Is this available now for current Event Tracker customers?
Yes, this is available now. In fact, we actually launched this a couple months ago. And one of the greatest things about this framework, like I'd mentioned previously, it's definitely not a static or individual point in time type of thing. It evolves. We're always expanding it. And another analogy, think of this as, I've used the term security practitioner throughout this presentation quite a bit. Our our security operations center, comprised of our security practitioners, the longer they have this in front of them, the more data to collect. It's like a doctor who's been out of med school for a longer period of time. They're more experienced. It's really all about that experience. So since we have been leveraging this framework now for a few months, it only gets better. Our efficiencies increase even more. Our false positives get reduced. And it is available now. And the other thing to note is that we're always looking for ways to expand this. So as time goes on, we'll be putting out some enhancements of features within our own framework, our framework's dashboard and its offering. So definitely available now. I hope people and our partners would love to use this in enhancing their offerings to their customers. But yeah, if you are a customer yourself, definitely log in and check it out if you have at least Event Tracker 9.3.
Okay. That appears to be it for the questions. Thank you so much, Mike, for all the information you shared today. Thank you to everybody who attended. As I mentioned at the top of this webcast, we will be sending out a recording. We will also have all those links shared in that email as well, so you can get all the resources that we had talked about. And I believe that is all we have for today. So thank you once again, Mike, for all the information you shared today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.